She married a mute stranger for money only, to discover the voice that healed her heart. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and is the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The rain had not stopped for 3 days. It fell steady over Los Angeles, slicking the streets with silver light and reflections of red traffic signals. Inside a small hospital cafeteria, Lena Moore sat hunched over a paper cup of black coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Her uniform was wrinkled, her eyes hollow. The unpaid bills in her bag were folded so many times the corners had worn thin. When the phone on the counter buzzed, she jumped. "Miss Moore," a calm male voice said. "This is the office of Adrian Hale. He requests to meet you. Tonight, 7 o'clock. Lena frowned. Adrian Hale. The name sounds familiar. "It should," the voice replied. "He owns Hale Biotech. The invitation concerns a private arrangement. A driver will pick you up." The line went dead before she could respond. By the time the black car stopped in front of her apartment, the rain had turned into a mist. The driver, a man in a gray suit, held the door open without a word. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and new leather. She clutched her small purse and whispered, "What could a millionaire possibly want with me?" The car climbed the hill toward the Pacific Palisades, where glass houses floated in fog like quiet ships. When they arrived, the gates opened with a metallic hum, revealing a mansion that seemed too silent for how alive the world outside was. The driver gestured toward the entrance. "Mr. Hale is waiting in the library." Lena stepped inside. The house was warm but strangely empty. A grand piano stood near the window, unplayed. In the corner, a man sat in the half-dark, his back straight, his gaze steady. He was younger than she expected, mid-30s maybe, his face pale against the charcoal suit. He lifted a notepad from the desk and began to write. "Thank you for coming. I cannot speak. The accident took my voice." He turned the page. "I need someone to marry me, not for love, for business. In return, I will pay all your debts and fund your mother's treatment." Lena blinked at the words, her heart pounding. "You want me to marry you? But we have never even met." He nodded once, sliding a file across the desk. Inside was a contract, 3 months, legal marriage, confidentiality clause, and a promise of $500,000 upon completion. She tried to find her voice. "Why me?" Adrian wrote again. "Because you do not belong to this world. You have nothing to gain by pretending. And I need someone who will not ask questions." His handwriting was sharp, deliberate. There was no cruelty in his eyes, only exhaustion like a man too tired to explain the storm that lived inside him. Lena stood frozen. She thought of the hospital bed, her mother's pale hand, the nurse whispering that insurance would not cover another week. She thought of the eviction notice taped to her door. Then she looked back at the man who had everything except a voice. "If I say yes," she said quietly, "what are the rules?" He turned another page. 3 months. You stay in the house. Separate rooms. No questions about my past. No public affection unless required. When the term ends, we part ways." He paused, then added a single line at the bottom. "You are free to refuse." Silence stretched between them, heavy as the rain. Lena exhaled slowly. "And if I accept?" For the first time, Adrian met her eyes fully. Something flickered, their relief, or maybe fear. He reached for the pen again and wrote, "Then you save both our lives." She signed. Her hand trembled, ink bleeding slightly onto the page. When she looked up, he had already risen, walking toward the piano. His fingers brushed the keys once, producing a low, aching note that seemed to fill the room like a sigh. The driver reappeared at the doorway. "Mrs. Hale," he said simply, as if the name had already become hers. Outside, thunder rolled across the coastline. Lena followed the sound, not knowing that behind the silence of this man waited the one voice that would heal her heart. And now, let us return to our main characters, as their strange marriage begins. Morning crept through the tall windows of the Hale estate, pale and cold. Lena woke in the guest wing of a house that did not feel real. The sheets smelled of lavender. The marble floor chilled her bare feet. On the nightstand sat a silver tray with breakfast and a folded note in clean handwriting. The driver will take you to the lawyer's office at 10. A.H. Downstairs, the staff moved quietly, like shadows. A housekeeper nodded, but did not speak. The silence of the place pressed on Lena's chest. It was as if the whole mansion obeyed its master's muteness. By 10 o'clock, she sat across a long glass table at Hale and Morrison Legal Group. Adrian was there already, writing rather than talking. The lawyer read each clause with a voice flat from routine. Separate rooms. No questions about his accident. Attend social events as his wife when required. Absolute confidentiality. Payment in full after the final month. Lena's fingers tightened around the pen. The lawyer asked gently, "Miss Moore, do you understand these terms?" "Yes," she answered. Her voice sounded small. Adrian pushed a slim velvet box toward her. Inside lay a simple platinum ring. She slipped it on. It was cold and heavy. He wrote one more line on the notepad and showed it to her. "It is only a symbol. You owe me nothing more than honesty." Something in her chest twisted at that. That evening, she moved into the east wing of the house. Her room overlooked the ocean, the waves breaking in endless rhythm below. From the hallway, faint notes of piano drifted again, the same melody she had heard the night before. She followed the sound and found Adrian in the music room, sleeves rolled to his elbows, eyes closed as his hands shaped the music gently. She stood quietly until he noticed her. He stopped, picked up the notepad beside the piano, and wrote, "Do you play?" She shook her head. "No. My mother used to hum, but we never had one of these." He smiled, a real one this time, brief but warm, and wrote another sentence. "Then I will play for you. It is how I speak." From that night, a rhythm formed between them. Mornings were spent in separate worlds. He in his study, she tending to household errands or reading on the veranda. Lunches were silent, except for the sound of waves. Sometimes he left her small notes beside the teapot. "The garden needs sunlight today," or "You look tired. Rest." One afternoon, rain pinned them inside again. The storm rattled the glass roof of the conservatory, where Lena sat sketching the orchids. Adrian entered with 2 mugs of tea. He wrote, "You draw well. I did not know that." "It helps me think," she said softly. "Silence feels easier when my hands are busy." He nodded and placed the cup beside her sketchbook. The gesture was so ordinary, yet for a man who lived behind a wall of quiet, it felt intimate. Days turned into weeks. The tension that had once filled the house began to loosen. She learned to read his expressions, the small lift of his brow, the way his jaw moved when something amused him. At night, when she passed the library, she often found him staring at the city lights below, a man listening to a world that had forgotten how to listen back. One evening, during dinner, he pushed a small piece of paper toward her plate. "Tomorrow there is a gala. I will need you there. Only for an hour." She hesitated. "I do not belong at a place like that." He wrote, "Neither do I." The following night, she stood beside him under chandeliers that glittered like falling stars. Reporters whispered about the silent millionaire and his young wife. She could feel the judgment burning against her skin. When an investor laughed loudly, saying, "A mute genius and a broke nurse, what a pair," Lena's cheeks flushed with anger. Before she could think, she turned to the man and said clearly, "He hears more than any of you do." The room went still. Adrian's hand brushed hers lightly, a silent thank you. His eyes glimmered not of pride, but something softer, something fragile. Later that night, in the quiet car ride home, Lena watched the city drift past in reflections of light. She realized the silence between them no longer felt empty. It felt full, like the pause before music begins. In the mansion's doorway, he wrote a final note for the night. "Good job today. You did not let them hurt me." She smiled faintly. "You did not need my help." He met her gaze, wrote one more line, and tore the page so she could keep it. Everyone needs a voice sometimes. She folded the paper carefully, not yet knowing that one day, it would be the first note in a story that would change them both. The following weeks at the Hale estate passed in a rhythm that felt almost unreal. Lena woke each morning to the sound of the ocean and the faint echo of piano keys from the west wing. She had learned that Adrian played every sunrise before the household stirred, the music slow and searching, as if he was still trying to find a part of himself that had been lost in silence. Her days had become a quiet routine. Breakfast appeared precisely at 8. Adrian left for meetings downtown, escorted by his assistant, then returned before dusk. Though he never spoke, she had grown used to his handwriting scattered around the house, sticky notes on the refrigerator, small reminders in his study, an occasional sketch of a seashell or the garden. One afternoon, she found him outside by the cliff garden, staring at the horizon. He wrote on the notepad he always carried. "You look lonely today." Lena gave a small laugh. "Maybe I am. It is strange living in a house that large and still hearing only the waves." He paused, then wrote again. "I used to love the noise of the city. Now I cannot stand it." "Because you cannot speak?" she asked quietly. His pen hesitated. "Because no one listened when I could." That line stayed with her for days. Rain returned on a Friday night, thick and heavy against the windows. The lights flickered, and a clap of thunder cut the sky in half. The mansion went dark. Lena was in the elevator between floors when it stopped with a jolt. The emergency light blinked once, then died. She pressed the button, called out for help, but only silence answered. Panic began to rise. The tight walls reminded her of when she was 10, trapped in a collapsed stairwell during an earthquake. Her breath came fast, shallow. "Please, somebody." Moments later, she heard the distant sound of running footsteps, then metal scraping. The door slid open, and a flashlight beam broke through the dark. Adrian stood there, drenched from the rain, his hand reaching for her. She stumbled forward, trembling. "I could not breathe," she whispered. "I thought I was going to." He pulled her close without hesitation. For the first time, he did not use a pen or paper. He tried to speak. The sound came rough, broken, but real. "You are safe now." Lena froze. The words were barely audible, like the rasp of wind through dry leaves, but they were his. Her eyes filled with tears. "You spoke," she said softly. Adrian winced, touching his throat as if the effort burned. "I try," he forced out. She helped him sit on the floor, her hands shaking as she held the flashlight. "You do not have to force it." He took her hand, his fingers cold, and mouthed the words slowly. "Thank you." In that dim corridor, something shifted between them. The silence that had always been a wall became a bridge. After the power returned, she brought him tea in the library. He sat by the fire, voice gone again but eyes alive. He scribbled on the page, hand unsteady. "It has been 1 year since I last tried to speak." She wrote beneath it, her own handwriting, small but certain. Then tonight was a start. The next morning, she found him in the piano room, playing the same melody she had first heard on the night they met. Only now it sounded different, lighter, open. When he finished, he looked at her and mouthed one word silently: "Stay." She did. As weeks passed, his attempts to speak became more frequent. A word at breakfast, a whispered greeting when she brought tea. Each time his voice cracked, she smiled wider. They began to communicate in a mixture of writing, gestures, and half-formed sounds that carried more meaning than perfect sentences ever could. But the outside world noticed. At a charity event a month later, cameras flashed, and headlines began to swirl. "The silent CEO's secret bride." Rumors spread faster than truth ever could. When they returned home that night, reporters already lined the gates. Lena felt the weight of every gaze. "They think I am after your money," she said bitterly. Adrian tried to write something, but she stopped him. "Do not defend me. Just tell me the truth. Why did you really marry me?" He met her eyes, pain flickering across his face. He wrote one line carefully. "I needed someone who would not leave when I had nothing to say." She stared at the page, heartbreaking and healing at once. Then she whispered, "You do not have to be silent anymore." He reached for her, but she stepped back, unsure, torn between gratitude and fear of hope. Outside, the storm had cleared, but inside the house, thunder still echoed between them. The next morning, the headlines covered every newsstand in Los Angeles. "Silent CEO marries broke nurse in secret deal." The words glared up at Lena from every screen she passed. When she reached the hospital to visit her mother, even the nurses looked at her differently, half curious, half cruel. Her mother lay pale against the pillows. "Sweetheart, what are they saying about you on television?" Lena forced a smile. "Nothing that matters, Mom, just stories." But when she turned away to fix the flowers, her hands trembled. By evening, the reporters had gathered at the gates of the Hale mansion. Flashbulbs exploded as soon as the car appeared. Adrian stepped out first, shielding her from the chaos, his face blank under the lights. He led her inside without a word. The doors closed, muffling the noise. But the damage had already seeped in. In the library, she faced him. "You knew this would happen. Did you marry me just to save your company's image?" Adrian shook his head violently and began to write, his hand shaking. "No, it was supposed to be quiet. I did not want them to know." "Then why did you not tell me? Why hide everything? The accident, the press, the lies." He slammed the pen down, frustration darkening his eyes. For the first time, he tried to speak again, his voice raw and broken. "Because I was afraid you would leave." The words shattered something inside her. She stared at him, stunned. "You think fear gives you the right to use people?" He looked down, unable to meet her gaze. The silence stretched until it hurt. She turned away. "I cannot stay here. I do not know who you are anymore." She packed that night. The ring lay on the dresser beside a small stack of his notes, tiny fragments of their life together. One read, "Everyone needs a voice sometimes." She folded it, placed it in her bag, and walked out into the dawn. Days turned into weeks. She found a small apartment near downtown and returned to nursing part-time. Yet every quiet moment reminded her of the mansion, the echo of piano keys, the way he wrote her name like a secret prayer. Then one morning, an envelope arrived under her door. No return address. Inside was a ticket to an art and sound exhibition titled Echoes of Silence. Her heart caught at the familiar initials in the corner, AHH. That evening, curiosity and something deeper pulled her there. The gallery was dim, filled with soft light and the hum of recorded voices. A crowd gathered before a large screen displaying video clips, moments she recognized instantly. Adrian, sitting at the piano. Adrian practicing speech therapy, mouthing single words over and over. Adrian writing letters that were never sent. His voice, faint but steady, filled the room. People think silence is empty. It is not. It is where truth waits to be spoken. And for me, truth was her. The audience turned as the lights shifted. Adrian stepped onto the stage. He was thinner, a faint scar visible along his neck, but he stood tall. When he spoke, his voice cracked once, then steadied. "I lost my voice after the accident. I thought I would never speak again. Then a woman entered my life who listened, even when I had nothing to say. Her name is Lena Moore." Lena froze. Cameras flashed. Adrian's eyes found hers through the crowd. "Tonight, I want to thank her not for healing my voice, but for teaching me what it means to use it." The room broke into applause. He stepped down, walked slowly toward her, the lights following. In his hand was a folded note, the last one she had left behind. He pressed it into her palm and whispered, "You once told me silence could feel safe. But I do not want safe anymore. I want you." Her tears fell freely. "You should have just said that," she whispered. "I am saying it now." The crowd faded into a blur as he went down on one knee. "Marry me again, Lena. No contract, no lies. Just love." The gallery lights shimmered like dawn on the sea as she nodded, unable to speak. He drew her close, his voice trembling but alive. "Your voice healed mine." And for the first time, the silence between them was not empty, it was home. The applause faded into a hush as the lights dimmed around them. Lena stood frozen, tears glimmering under the soft glow of the stage. Adrian's voice trembled once more, but he held her hand firmly, as if afraid that letting go would send him back into silence. When they stepped off the stage, reporters swarmed, microphones raised, flashes bursting like white lightning. Yet this time, Adrian did not hide. He spoke clearly, his tones slow but sure. "There was never a contract for profit," he said. "There was a promise to heal, and she did." He turned to Lena, the cameras still rolling. "For the first time, I want the world to hear me, but only because she taught me how to listen first." The next morning, headlines told a different story. Silent CEO speaks for love. Hail biotech founder credits wife for recovery. The public fascination softened into admiration. What had begun as scandal now looked like redemption. Weeks passed, and the mansion on the hill no longer felt like a cage. Lena filled the empty spaces with laughter, color, and the scent of baked bread from the kitchen. Adrian spent hours in the music room again, his voice still rough, but strong enough to hum along with the piano. One afternoon, she found him setting up microphones and a camera. "What are you doing?" she asked, smiling. He adjusted the lens, voice quiet but steady. "Recording something for the company, and for us." When she returned that evening, the video had already been uploaded. It was titled, "One Kindness Day." In it, Adrian spoke directly to the camera. Every voice matters, even when it trembles. Every act of kindness begins in silence, when someone chooses to listen instead of speak. The video ended with an image of a single white piano in a sunlit room and a small plaque beneath it that read, "Your voice healed mine." Within hours, millions had viewed it. People began sharing their own stories of hope and forgiveness. That weekend, Adrian took Lena to a small park overlooking the ocean. A modest ceremony waited there, no cameras, no audience, only the minister, the waves, and the scent of sea salt in the wind. He wore a navy suit, simple but elegant. She wore a white dress with sleeves that fluttered like light. When the minister asked if he had any vows, Adrian smiled, reached for her hand, and spoke without hesitation. "I once believed silence protected me, but you showed me that love is not about being unbroken, it is about being heard. I may lose my voice again one day, but I will never lose the words you gave me." Her eyes glistened as she whispered, "And I will never forget the sound of your first word." They exchanged rings beneath the pale gold of the setting Sunday. When he kissed her, the waves below crashed, as if echoing his voice back to the world. Later, as twilight deepened, they returned to the piano room together. The house no longer felt silent, it breathed. Adrian played softly, each note gentle and alive. Lena sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. He paused between chords and murmured, "Do you know what I hear now?" She smiled. "What?" "Your heartbeat," he said simply. "It is louder than any music." The camera, forgotten in the corner, captured that final image, the two of them at the piano, the ocean glittering beyond the glass, his hand over hers on the keys. No contracts, no lies. Only love, and the quiet strength of a voice that had finally found its home. Autumn arrived quietly at the Hale estate, painting the coastline in gold and amber. The air had grown cooler, and the days slipped into an easy rhythm that Lena had never known before. She and Adrian began their mornings on the terrace, watching the waves roll in while he read the newspaper aloud, his voice still slightly rough but stronger each day. She loved the sound of it, the warmth in each word, the pauses he took to breathe, the small smile when she corrected his pronunciation. Sometimes he would stop mid-sentence just to look at her, as if still amazed that she had stayed. After breakfast, Adrian often disappeared into his studio. Music filled the house again, not just piano this time, but the faint echo of recordings. He had begun composing something new, an album of instrumental pieces called The Shape of Silence. He told her it was not meant for profit, but for memory. "You turned silence into beauty," Lena said one afternoon, standing behind him as he played. He looked up, voice gentle. "No, you did." The following week, they hosted a small charity event at the mansion. It was Adrian's idea, an initiative inspired by One Kindness Day. Instead of luxury donors and press, the guests were veterans, teachers, and local families who had once struggled as Lena had. The ballroom, once a stage for empty applause, now echoed with laughter and real stories. During his short speech, Adrian's voice wavered but held steady. "For years I lived behind silence, thinking it made me strong. But I learned that silence without kindness is just another kind of loneliness. So today, we listen to each other, to the quiet moments that still matter." When the crowd applauded, Lena's eyes met his across the room, and in that glance was everything they had endured, contracts, storms, and all the words they had never needed to say. Later that evening, as the guests left and the mansion returned to calm, Adrian found her outside by the cliff. The ocean stretched endlessly below, shimmering with the light of 1,000 city windows. He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "Do you ever miss the noise?" he asked softly. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but not as much as I used to. Silence used to scare me. Now, it just feels honest." He smiled, pulling her closer. "That is because you filled it with meaning." She leaned her head against his chest, hearing the rhythm of his heartbeat beneath the steady breath. "You know," she whispered, "I think your voice came back because you finally had something worth saying." Adrian kissed the top of her head. "And I plan to keep saying it." The next morning, Lena woke to find the piano room bathed in sunlight. A small framed photograph sat atop the instrument, one from their wedding day at the park. Wind blowing through her veil as he looked at her like she was the first sound after a long silence. Beneath it was a new inscription carved into the wood. "Love does not need to be loud to be heard." She smiled, tracing the words with her fingertips. Outside, she heard his voice calling from the terrace. "Lena, come see this." She stepped out to find him holding 2 cups of coffee, the ocean sparkling behind him. "What is it?" she asked. He gestured toward the horizon where a flock of white birds lifted into the morning air. "Listen," he said. "They sound like music." She laughed. "You are just saying that because you cannot stop comparing everything to sound." He chuckled, the sound full and alive. "Maybe. But I like the noise we make best." The camera from their earlier recording still sat on the patio table, quietly blinking its red light. It caught them just as they leaned in, their laughter blending with the crash of the waves below. And when the video later appeared on the Hale Foundation's page with the caption, "Kindness has a voice," millions would hear not just their words but the living proof that love, once found, could turn silence itself into a song. Winter crept quietly along the California coast, soft and cold. The mansion, once echoing with music, now held a deeper calm. The kind of silence that came not from loneliness, but from peace. Lena sat by the wide window, watching waves roll under the cloudy sky, a mug of cocoa warming her hands. She could hear Adrian in the next room, finishing the last track of his album, The Shape of Silence. The piano's low notes rapped through the hallways like a heartbeat, but the peace did not last long. One morning, as she walked into the study, she found Adrian's assistant, Marcus, standing tense beside a stack of documents. "There has been an issue," he said carefully. An anonymous source leaked internal recordings from the foundation. "Some investors claim you used charity funds for personal promotion." Lena's breath caught. "That is not true. We donated everything to the community center." Marcus nodded. "We know, but the media wants a story." That evening, headlines returned like ghosts. The silent CEO's wife under fire for foundation scandal. Photographs of Lena at the charity event filled every feed, captions twisting her smile into suspicion. Adrian found her on the balcony, phone in hand, tears glimmering. "They are saying I used you," she whispered, "that everything we built was a lie again." He stepped forward, taking her hand. "Then we will tell them the truth together." The next day, they faced a room full of reporters. Cameras flashed like lightning, questions cutting through the air. Adrian's voice, though still rough, carried strength. "When you lose your voice, you learn the weight of words," he said. "My wife stood beside me when I had nothing to give. She built this foundation with her own hands. If that is something worth attacking, then let them." Lena added softly, "We created the foundation to help people find their voice, not to protect ours." For a moment, the room fell still. Then one reporter asked, "So this is not another story of a millionaire saving a woman?" Adrian smiled faintly. "No, it is the story of a woman who saved me." The line went viral within hours. Public sympathy turned sharply. Messages flooded their social media letters from people who had once been afraid to speak, from nurses, veterans, and single parents who said they finally felt seen. 2 weeks later, the board of directors cleared all allegations. The foundation's donations tripled overnight. Yet what mattered to Lena most was the night after the press conference, when she found Adrian alone in the piano room, staring at the ocean through the glass. He spoke first. "I almost let the noise drown us again." She crossed the room and touched his shoulder. "Then we just keep playing louder." He looked at her with that quiet awe she had come to know. "Do you realize what you did, Lena? You gave silence meaning." She smiled softly. "You gave it a voice." He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers. "I think I am finally ready to finish this song," he murmured. "Which one?" she asked. "The one that started the night you said yes." As he played, she stood beside him, humming the melody he had written years ago but never completed. The harmony rose, warm and alive, blending with her voice. When the final note faded, the only sound left was their breathing, steady and calm. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall over the cliffs, dissolving into the dark water below. Adrian whispered, "Do you hear that?" Lena listened. "The snow?" He nodded. "No. The quiet between the sound. It is beautiful." She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. It always was. And as the piano fell silent again, the world outside seemed to exhale with them, proof that love, once tested by storms and rumor, had learned how to survive in both noise and stillness. Spring came early that year. The ocean below the cliffs shimmered like glass, and the Hale estate bloomed again with color. The storm of rumors and accusations had passed, leaving behind something steadier, a quiet kind of strength that no longer needed defending. Lena stood on the terrace one morning, arranging wildflowers in a tall vase. The house smelled of sunlight and salt. Adrian walked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. His voice, once fragile, was now calm and certain. "The Foundation's new center opens next week," he said. "They want you to cut the ribbon." She turned to him with a smile. "Me? You are the founder." He shook his head. "You are the reason it exists. You turned my silence into a purpose." For a moment, neither of them spoke. They watched the seagulls drift over the cliffs, the waves breaking in slow rhythm below. It was the same view from the night she had first agreed to marry him, only now the silence between them felt sacred. When the day of the opening came, the city was alive with sunlight. The community center stood near the edge of downtown, its glass fade reflecting the sky. Children ran through the courtyard holding paper pinwheels, and the sound of laughter filled the air. Lena felt her throat tighten as she saw the sign above the entrance. The Echo Center, where every voice matters. Adrian stepped to the microphone. 2 years ago, he began, I believed that silence was my punishment. But someone taught me that silence can also be a beginning. This place is not about me. It is about every person who has ever felt unheard. Today, we give them a space to speak. When the applause began, Adrian looked toward Lena, eyes shining. She lifted the scissors and cut the ribbon. The crowd erupted in cheers. For the first time, she felt her life had circled back to something complete. Inside, walls were lined with artwork made by people from the community, drawings, poems, and letters about courage. On one display hung the first note Adrian had ever written to her. Everyone needs a voice sometimes. It was framed under glass. A journalist approached her quietly. "Mrs. Hale, after everything you have both been through, what message do you want to leave for those watching?" Lena smiled, her voice steady. "That kindness does not need an audience. It only needs to be real." That night, back at the mansion, Adrian found her sitting at the piano, fingers tracing the keys, but not pressing them. He leaned against the doorway, watching. "Do you miss it?" he asked. She looked up. "The noise? The chaos?" "No," he said softly. "The beginning." Lena smiled faintly. "We never lost it. It just changed shape." He joined her on the bench, his hand covering hers. The house filled with music again, this time not with pain or longing, but gratitude. Their melody carried through the open windows, blending with the wind from the ocean. When they finished, he reached into his pocket and handed her a folded piece of paper. It was another note, written in the same deliberate handwriting she had come to know. "When I could not speak, you listened. When I was afraid, you stayed. When I found my voice, you gave it meaning." She unfolded it slowly, eyes glistening. "This is not just your story anymore," she whispered. "It is ours." Adrian nodded. "Then let us keep writing it." Outside, the evening light turned gold, wrapping the house in warmth. The piano stood open, its strings humming faintly with the echoes of their song. It was no longer a house built on silence. It was a home built on every word they had fought to find, every truth they had dared to speak, and every quiet moment that had taught them how to love without fear. Summer sunlight stretched across the ocean, warm and endless. The Hale estate, once haunted by silence, now carried the sound of life. Everywhere, music from the piano, laughter from the garden, and the hum of the world that Lena and Adrian had rebuilt together. It had been 3 years since their first meeting in that dark mansion on the hill. The air no longer smelled of fear or isolation. It smelled of morning coffee, fresh roses, and pages of handwritten notes that Adrian still left on her bedside table. That morning, she woke to one of them. "Meet me by the beach at noon." Lena smiled, tucking the note into her pocket. When she reached the shore, Adrian was already there, barefoot in the sand, sleeves rolled up, his hair tousled by the wind. A small crowd gathered nearby, friends, staff from the foundation, and families they had helped through the years. A stage had been set up with a microphone and a single white piano facing the sea. "What is this?" she asked, her voice full of surprise. He grinned. "The foundation is launching a new campaign, but this one is not about me." He gestured to a banner that read, "The Voice Within. Every story deserves to be heard." He took her hand, guiding her toward the piano. "You taught me that a single act of kindness can echo forever. So today, we give that echo back to the world." The event began quietly. Adrian played the opening notes of their song, the same melody that had once filled the mansion during the storm years ago. When he finished, He spoke clearly into the microphone, his voice carrying over the water. I used to believe silence was my destiny. Then I met someone who reminded me that love is not something you hear. It is something you feel, even in the quiet. She did not just heal my voice, she healed my life. Lena felt her throat tighten as the crowd applauded. She stepped forward, her heart steady, and said, "We all have a story that begins in pain, but it does not have to end there. Sometimes, the person you save ends up saving you." The sound of waves mingled with the applause. Children from the center released white kites into the sky, each tied with a message written by people who had once lost hope. The kites drifted higher, carrying hundreds of small voices into the wind. As the ceremony ended, Adrian turned to her, eyes bright. "Do you hear that?" he asked softly. Lena smiled. "Yes, it is the sound of us." He took her hand and placed it over his chest. No contracts, no fear. Just this. The tide reached their feet, cool and rhythmic, as if the ocean itself was keeping time with their hearts. Later, as the sun dipped low, they walked back toward the house. The sky glowed in shades of pink and gold, and behind them, the piano still shimmered in the light. On its lid sat one last note in Adrian's familiar handwriting. The truest sound in the world is not a voice. It is the moment two hearts finally understand each other. Lena folded the note and slipped it into her dress pocket. She looked at him, her smile soft. "I think that is our story." Adrian nodded. "And it is still being written." They stood hand in hand as the waves curled around their feet, the world quiet and alive all at once. The silence that once divided them had become the language of their love, proof that even in stillness, the heart can speak louder than words.